3, 2, 1, action. Okay. So baby, are we doing okay?
Is that recorded?
My name is Jordan Tumwesigye. I am a lawyer and an advocate of the High Court. I'm all subordinate courts there too. I currently work with the Center for Health, Human Rights and Development as a program officer in charge of campaigns, partnerships and networks. The first Ugandan book I read, I do not remember the author, but it was Gulo Goes to School. I read that book in, I think, my P1. It was part of the curriculum, and that was the first Ugandan book. I remember it was about a girl who went to school, and she had gone to school with a goat. Yeah, I think a goat at home or something like that. So that was the first Ugandan book I read, and a very interesting book, I must add. I read it because it was part of the syllabus, and by then reading was not something I took on as an interest. It was something that I did because it was part of the school curriculum, which is actually true for so many Ugandans currently. They only read because things are part of the curriculum, or they read because it's mandatory. My favorite book in 2021 was a book by Richard Reid, which you actually shared, A History of Modern Uganda. I love history books so much, and that book was exceptional because it was written with such clarity, with such purpose, and it helps you understand that the problems that modern Uganda grapples with are problems that have been with us since time immemorial. For instance, I remember one particular aspect of the book that I found very interesting was the compartmentalization of Uganda, whereby the northern part of the country was looked at as militant and therefore more fit for army service as opposed to the south, and that has historical reasons as to why, because as early as the time when Sir Samuel Baker came into the country, the people he was using were people that were traditionally in the north. When you look at the wars that Kabalega was having with Buganda, the mercenaries that Bunyoro was using are all people that came either from Sudan or from the area that we now know as Arua and Gulu and the like. So for me, I found that very interesting, and that's something no historical book about this country had ever brought out. So it's a very interesting book in that it shows that whatever problems we have currently, these are problems that are not new to us as a country. These are problems that have actually been there since time immemorial. So it was my favorite book last year. But I also hasten to add that I read so many other books. I reread Scott Fitzgerald's 1920 classic, The Great Gatsby, and that's a book that I find very inspiring, and I make sure that every single year I read that book because the message for me is always new. So it in a way, that book also features among my favorite books of 2021. Even when I've read it, I think in 2021 that was the 10th time I was reading the book. That book is my Bible. I do not read the book merely from the context of the story, but I read the book because it has deeper, more underlying messages that so many people overlook because of the attractive story that the author was able to get out. 2022. Obviously, again, I'm very excited to reread to reread Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, but also this year I am very, very excited to read this book. I think we shall cut this out. I want to get this title. Okay. Yes, Chronicles from the Land of the Happiest People on Earth. I am very excited. So I'm very excited to read this book this year because Wole Soyinka is an important author for me. I've read almost all his books, and I'm very excited to be reading a book that from his latest collection. So this is a book that I'm most excited to read this year. Okay, so previously I used to get my books from largely from Aristoc, from bookshops and all that, but it became difficult to get time to go to the bookshops and get the books from there. So these days I usually get all my books from Mariri Books because it's very easier. You just go to their website, you pick a book, and then it's very easy for the book to be shipped to you. So I like using that because it's more convenient than going to bookstores to buy books. The average Ugandan book, I think I would consider maybe 100,000, because I think that of course that depends on quality and the process that the whole process of making the book and whatnot. But I think a fair Ugandan book would go for 100,000 because we have very interesting stories to tell. So if Barack Obama's Promised Land will go for 200,000, then surely I think a fair Ugandan book, 100,000 would not be a bad price. Of course, I'm talking from a middle class point of view. I prefer Ugandan authors, and we've been having this conversation for a very long time. I personally prefer history books, and when you look at the people who have really written well about our history, these are white people. But I think that as Ugandans, it's very important for us to start telling our stories. So I would actually prefer a Ugandan book with all our grammar, with all our sentences that do not make sense. I feel like they still tell our story better than foreigners. First of all, I need to say that okay, I wrote a book. It's a poetry anthology. I wrote this in 2014. It's called Droplets of Honey. I'm very happy to share, and maybe you could tell me what you think about the book. I designed the book, but unfortunately, it was not peer reviewed. It wasn't really reviewed. But in terms of publishing a book, it's definitely something I'm working on. I'm working on a novel currently. I do not want to disclose titles right now. It's like a short story, yeah. So I'm currently working on a short story, and I hope that maybe in about 2-3 years I should be able to publish it. My advice to Ugandan authors is, one, please stay away from self-help books. People are not reading self-help books. People do not believe in the gospel of self-help books, firstly. Second of all, I think it helps when, as a country, we cultivate and get our own style, as opposed to looking at styles that are traditionally West African or South African, and in some cases British or American. I think it's very important for us to be able to identify particular styles and sticking to those styles. But most importantly, people are not reading self-help books. People do not care about self-help books. I know for a fact that I do not care about self-help books, and I know so many Ugandans are rushing into that. It's easy to do, but it helps no one. My advice to readers is I could share my experience based on how I read books. I read books based on page limits that I assign on particular days. For instance, it's a discipline that I've gotten over time. I tell myself that no matter how complex a book is, I will read 25 pages of a book every single day. So you find when you read that, and then maybe in about 8 weeks, on average, you're done with quite a big book. So I think pace your reading and also make notes from your reading, because reading is supposed to be applied. People read books for the sake of reading, but I think for me what I do, I take notes for all the books that I read. I write down notes because later on I'm able to apply the quotes or whatever I've gotten from the books, not just in arguments or political debates, but also in general in life. Because for instance, when you read Marcus Aurelius, and I know he's not a Ugandan author, but his lessons could ideally apply to us. He teaches you about the value of letting things go. In his book Meditations, for instance, he says that when you wake up in the morning, you need to tell yourself that the people you're going to meet are going to be messy, they're going to be troubling, but you need to tell yourself that they do all those things because they do not know any better. So that's a lesson that I have always applied in my life. So I also think it's something that readers need to take to their hearts and ensure that you're not reading books for the sake of reading books, but rather reading to apply the knowledge that you've gotten from the books. Yes, I have a book club with my girlfriend. It's just the two of us, and yeah, this episode should come out on Valentine's Day, by the way. Yeah, but I have a book club with my girlfriend. We read books together, and we meet and discuss and disagree about the books. Other than that, I do not belong to any particular book club, because Ugandan book clubs are notorious for discussing self-help books, and as I indicated earlier, I find self-help books to be very, very troubling. And yeah, I'm going to be very cliche and quote Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela once said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And I think as human beings, it's very important for us to consistently educate ourselves. We need to read more, not just in areas that we're comfortable in, but we need to read more in areas that challenge us, areas that we disagree with, because that could be the weapon that we use to actually change the world. Thank you.